Everybody, I'm Rachel Hershberg. I'm an assistant professor of community psychology, and this is Vanessa Veritch Woodside, who's assistant professor of Hispanic studies. Spanish. Oh, I'm already messed up. Okay, good start. Say it one more time. Spanish. Okay, my apologies. But we're both professors in School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences, and we've been doing very similar research, but from very different disciplinary lenses for quite some time. And we came together to do this grant that we received. Our background is really doing research on transnational and mixed status families, doing research with these families, but also about them. I focused on how our detention and deportation policies affect children and families, particularly working with families in the northeastern part of this country before I joined faculty here, as well as their relatives in Guatemala. And Vanessa has looked similarly at family experiences through the lens of literature. But what we realized recently was that there hasn't been a lot of focus on what's happening in the Pacific Northwest related to our detention and deportation system. And we have the Northwest Detention Center in our backyard, which is the fourth largest detention center in the country. So we wanted to come together and to do a small project on this that we thought could lead to something else. So our study is called Displacement, Detention, and Integration of Immigrants and Refugees in the South Sound. The goal of our project is to better understand the experiences and needs of immigrants and refugee communities, particularly of those community members who arrived here without authorization initially, but have since received some legal status. We want to focus on this community in particular, one, because they're not as vulnerable as communities who are currently detained, right? So it's a little bit more accessible. But also, there just hasn't been a lot of research about what happens when family members who live in Tacoma and the Northwest more broadly are detained, even temporarily, and then have to reintegrate back into the community, which is happening currently. And we also don't really know what happens when people arrive at our border without documentation status as asylum seekers, and for those who are lucky enough to get it, again, reintegrate or are integrated into Tacoma. So just to give you a sense of why we think detention and deportation is a problem beyond sort of the obvious, is that in addition to having a huge immigration system in this country, over the last 2 decades, we've really developed a full-fledged detention and deportation system. So over the last couple decades, we've deported about over 10 million people from the United States. We've removed over 10 million people from the United States. Under Obama, we had the highest number of deportations in history. It reached 400,000, and the system has continued to thrive. Under the Trump administration, we've actually deported fewer people, but they've been less targeted deportations, right? So under Obama, we had at the end of his time in office, we had secure communities, which was targeting people who had criminal records. Under the Trump administration, it's a much less targeted system. So we have a lot more people, as we've learned from one of our community partners just yesterday, a lot more people who are in Tacoma and have been here for a long time who are now being targeted for deportation but don't necessarily have criminal records. So as you all know, I think because this is such kind of public attention, the effects of detention and deportation on families and communities are very significant. In Washington, we have a large population of foreign-born individuals. We have also 900,000 people in Washington who are native-born Americans that have at least one immigrant parent. And we know that about 1 in 5 children in U.S. schools is a child of immigrants. So globally, this is a huge issue. Nationally, it's a huge issue. But locally, right in our backyard, this is a huge issue that we wanted to come together to investigate. And this is just a picture of the Northwest Detention Center. Currently, they have about 1,575 people detained here on a daily basis. And throughout the nation, we have a mandate by Congress to have about 40,000 people detained on a random day. So we wanted to work together with our community partners to really investigate the effects of this locally. And Vanessa is going to talk a little bit more about the specific goals of our project with our various community partners and what's happening in Tacoma.
Thank you. Just changing of the guard here. So among some of our principal objectives with this study, we hope to simply document individuals' experiences before, during, and after migration. And you can see that we also are striving to understand better through our collaboration with local organizations that work with this population of immigrants and refugees who have obtained legal status after being present without authorization, to identify ways to improve the services and contribute to the overall well-being of this group. So as such, we'll build upon our existing connections with a variety of community partners. Ooh, there's one last hope. Some of these partners include Tacoma Community House, Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, Aid Northwest, or Advocates for Immigrants in Detention Northwest, World Relief, and also Lutheran Community Services Northwest. We're working with them to recruit initially 10 to 20 participants for interviews for their initial phase of the study, and also to identify certain questions or issues that these organizations would like for us to address to help them to better support families that are affected by detention practices. Notably, each one of these providers, and there are even more locally than these, offer specific services to immigrants and refugees during and after detention, particularly in the Northwest Detention Center. And they also offer services to their family members. So they have a very keen interest and better understanding as well how detention affects individuals and family and how best to support these families with post-detention integration or resettlement in our communities in Tacoma and the greater South Sound regions. So between February and July of this year, we'll conduct life narrative interviews with our participants. And we expect that our sampling will help us to better understand the vast diversity within this group in terms of ethnicity, nationality, linguistic background. As an example, just during April to July of 2016, Aid Northwest Welcome Center, which is a center just outside the detention center, which is sort of the first stop for people who have been released from detention, they offered services to 362 individuals during these couple of months from over 41 countries. So I think in the general landscape of what we imagine the immigrant refugee communities being like and who's represented in the detention center, what our perceptions are quite distinct from reality, and we want to be able to document that through the work that we're doing. So I should mention that the role of UW-T students and undergrads in particular is critical for our project. So we plan to include multilingual students as research assistants and also as a program coordinator, both to leverage their knowledge base and their linguistic skills, but also to provide valuable research opportunities and experiences working with immigrants and refugees. So they'll assist us with our data collection and also with our inductive and deductive analysis. And I should mention many of the students that we already are working with are very much drawn to continuing their work and working in meaningful ways in the local community during and after graduation. So, as such, our research addresses the impact goals of not only students, but also scholarship and community. More specifically, we'll create more research opportunities for students, which is a high-impact educational practice that will help students further their educational and career trajectories. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here about this because I'm sure you all are in alignment with these. So we'll also enhance the interdisciplinarity of our own scholarship. Rachel shared a bit about our different theoretical lenses from which we approach issues of transnationalism and mixed status families, and we're eager to get to really foster more interdisciplinarity through how our exploration of how detention and deportation affects families, and how to improve the services and experiences of these individuals and families in really concrete ways. So we'll be able to leverage our own community engaged work that we've already been doing in Tacoma to enhance our scholarship and vice versa. And of course, by furthering our own scholarship, we're able to further develop opportunities for our students to conduct local research and work with immigrants and refugees here from an interdisciplinary perspective. So we're hoping that this will ultimately educate not just the UW-T community, but the broader community about who this population of immigrants and refugees is. Because as I mentioned, I think now with the political arena as it is and the dynamic we're experiencing, there's a lot more attention to immigration issues and to the detention center. But I don't think there's a really nuanced understanding of what that community really is, at least as is the case here in Tacoma. Okay. Let's jump in.
Summarize most of these, but again, we're working already with our community partners to develop our interview protocol so that the questions we're asking serve them directly, not just our own sort of desire for knowledge about this topic. But we think we could get some information that might be harder, especially, for example, at Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, our lawyers that have helped people receive status. Sometimes those immigrants aren't necessarily comfortable critiquing, right, the services they've received because they're so grateful. So we might be able to get information that would be difficult from the community partners to get themselves. And Vanessa and I hope to work with the larger oral history project that the school has been doing under Mike Honey's leadership to some degree to really use some of the data we get to become part of these archives, because these families are becoming part of Tacoma's history, and we want that to be well documented. And again, as we mentioned, contribute to the literature in both of our fields around immigrant and refugee families and communities. So the last piece of information is that we're working on recruitment, and we hope to start getting our IRB is under review right now. Lisa will be happy to hear that. Our IRB is under review, so we hope it will be approved quickly, and we will start recruiting in February. And then the next phase will be trying to work with youth who have been detained locally as well. So we have to thank our community partners, and thank you, the Office of Research and the Collaborative Publicly Engaged Scholarship Fund for giving us the resources we need to do this work. We're very excited to get started.